Hello, and welcome to Under 1000. My name's Thomas Flower, and each episode I'll read you a new piece of flash fiction. All of the stories are 1000 words or less. Today, I'll be reading Outrunning the Future. Please be aware that this episode deals with themes of societal collapse and death, so if that's likely to upset you, or anyone that you're listening with, then you might want to skip this one. It was the end of the road. At least, that's what was largely assumed. The few remaining societies left on Earth were staring collapse directly in the face. The competing challenges of an uninhabitable world, various strains of now untreatable diseases, and the endless wars over the few remaining resources had left the tiny number of humans so devastated that the best any of them hoped for these days was to see out the rest of their natural lives in as pain-free a fashion as possible. But then, it came, rolling like a wave across so many different communities. They say that the inventor hailed from somewhere in Neo-Canada. They say that it started when she sent details of her creation to her friend. They say that those details were stolen, intercepted, and leaked to the population at large. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. The only important thing was that the machine described was easy to assemble and that it would allow for an escape from this place. It was a one-way journey, of course. Once you left, there was no going back. But then, who would want to come back here? If you could choose to be free of all the pain, struggle, and brutality that this world now held, why would you ever want to return? But that wasn't the only issue. It was also impossible to predict exactly when and where the machine would drop you, once initiated. Being so basic and easy to build, there was no way to program the thing to arrive at a specific destination, either in time or place. People knew that once they flicked the switch, they would most likely be saying goodbye to everyone they had ever known. They did it anyway. What value do friends, loved ones, family hold when weighed against the prospect of being able to live a full life? There were tears shed, of course, and difficult negotiations made as to who would travel in which machines together, but it did not deter people. Those who could made sure to leave as quickly as possible. Those left behind searched frantically for a way to build the machines for themselves. And so, the world became increasingly depopulated. Not in the way everyone had expected it to, with the slow, grasping death of exhaustion, but simply through abandonment. Everyone was out to seek a better life for themselves, in some other time. The only future, it was agreed, was in the past. Eventually, humanity was reduced to the thousands, then the hundreds, and finally, tiny individual households, disconnected and scattered across the globe. They were those who could not escape, and who it seemed likely never would now. They tried to console themselves, to tell themselves that they would now have free reign over a world without hostility or threat. But they knew, in each of their atomized communities, that supplies would run out soon, and that then there would be nothing left. Humanity was at an end, at least in this time period. As for those who had escaped, they did manage to survive, at least at first. They acquainted themselves with their new homes, tried to fit in, find jobs, be unremarkable, and get by. For them, simply having a life like this was a miracle after all. They could never have imagined such a thing where they had come from, and they tried not to take for granted just what they had managed to stumble into. And yet, in each time period where these travellers arrived, cracks began to emerge. Strange occurrences, which disrupted the course of history from where it had once been. In 1795, an odd new disease began to spread, one which physicians could neither understand nor treat. It tore through the globe, decimating huge swathes of each country it touched, until at last it had burnt itself out. In 1953, a strange idea, a vision of the future, emerged. It was laid out so clearly in an odd, discarded book that it seemed almost as if it had fallen from another time itself. This new conception of the future began rippling out in popularity among large parts of the world. The picture it painted of where humanity was headed and how led to uprisings in many places which governments were quick and keen to quash beneath powerful, well-armed military might. The deaths were many, and in the following years, these nations moved further and further towards an authoritarian style of governing, out of fear of what had come before. In 2067, meanwhile, a strange futuristic machine was discovered and repurposed, before being spread amongst the population through covert means, passed on like a whispered secret from household to household. The spate of sudden and simultaneous disappearances of whole streets could not be explained by anyone, and led to widespread panic, which authorities were unable to control or contain. And so, the cracks spread out and out and out, fracturing the very history of humanity itself, until the shards of what had come before were an absurd and unrecognizable mess of impossible events. The end of humanity had spread out like a plague, emanating from the end of history into all times, until death and social disintegration became the norm. With each change, the waves rolled forward into all future times, until entire decades were wiped of their human inhabitants. And the travellers looked on, caught up in what they had created, separately, witnessing the same breakdown across so many periods of time. And they realized that there was no future in the past. Not anymore. Thank you for listening to Under 1000. I'm your host, Thomas Flower. To follow the show online, look for Under 1000 Pod on Twitter or Facebook, or check out the website at under1000pod.com. If you'd like to support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/under1000pod, where you can sign up to read each month's stories in advance, as well as to have a thank you be read during these credits. The theme music is an instrumental version of In Between Days by Nick Tate and the Sharks. To hear the full song, and more from the same EP, go to Nick Tate, NICTATE, and thesharks.bandcamp.com, or search for them on your favourite streaming platform. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and that you'll join me again next time for some more super short fiction.